about Mr. Kumar. He drives the business growth of Symphony and also, of course, oversees the subsidiaries. He has nearly 2 decades of experience in the corporate and consulting sectors. He's worked with companies such as GE, PwC, Shapoorji Pallonji, EY, and KPMG. And, he also had his own tech startup linked to data analytics. Welcome to Economic Times.
Thanks, Melody. It's a pleasure to be here today. The agenda for this session is also something that is very close to my heart. I'd like to mention, there was a time when I was leading my own startup, which can be classified into the MSME universe. So that's something that's very close to my heart. So again, a pleasure to be here.
Right, and you also studied in Gujarat at the IIM Ahmedabad. So you have deep roots, with the state.
That's right.
And the city, of course.
Yes, absolutely, and that's something that the study here, the education here was one critical aspect of how the thinking process shaped up around growing the business and going global at the same time.
All right, so our focus today is on the growth mantra for MSMEs of today, which will become the MNCs of tomorrow, something like a symphony story, right? From your vantage, talk to us about, how do you see MSMEs, now especially the MSMEs in Gujarat, driving India's growth story, the story of entrepreneurship and driving innovation?
Melody, we all know, and this is a fact that we all appreciate very much. The MSMEs form the backbone of the economy in the country. One of the less appreciated facts, we talk about multiple sectors in the country. There's the IT sector, there's the automobile sector. The MSME sector in itself contributes to more than 1/3 of the GDP and more than 40% of the exports of our country. They are contributed to by the MSME. So it's obviously something that is very important for the economy. Now, just looking at the sheer size of the MSME segment, it's more than $1 trillion in terms of the sheer size. And if you look at the entire globe, there are only 16 countries across the globe that have a GDP higher than this. So that's just to put this in perspective. Now, if I look down, let's say in next few years, let's say over a 5 to 7 year timeline, what I envisage, what I see is that this sector will contribute more than 40% of our GDP. And in terms of the absolute growth, we are talking about at least another $1 trillion added to the economy, just by the MSME sector. So that's the kind of growth we are talking about. So as the MSME sector grows, it adds to the hinterland, to the growth in the hinterland. And more than 50% of the MSMEs are actually registered in tier 2s and tier 3s and beyond. So that's the kind of growth I envisage or I see led by the MSMEs in the country.
And some of the growth is also fueled by some of the initiatives that Mr. Barhat also mentioned, like for instance, this entire initiative, which is, linked to the the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and now you have the Atmanirbhar Gujarat initiative, and, through that, all the incentivization which is being provided. But apart from that, from your vantage, can you talk about the kind of support or the kind of, supporting framework that you envisage will be needed as we move ahead, especially as we aim to get globally competitive?
For the MSMEs, and again, coming from the benefit and the privilege of interacting with many of them, there's one thing that we need to appreciate is there's an amazing amount of entrepreneurial zeal, the energy that is there, the capability that is there. So more than the support, what I think the MSMEs need is enablement. And this enablement, so we are not talking particularly about giving them something. We are just talking about enabling them do something better, because there are aspects that they just need to be introduced to. Now, if we think of it, and maybe we can think of it through the life cycle journey of an MSME, and starting from a micro to a medium to a small to a medium kind of growth. The first and foremost thing is the formalization of the business itself. If you see, there are close to maybe 70 million MSMEs across the country. But, and like Rajesh ji was mentioning earlier, there's this Udyam where we can register, and in our knowledge, only about 12 to 15% of the MSMEs are actually registered there. So formalization is the first step towards doing anything more material. And when I say formalization, it's not only just in terms of registration. It also enables them to be visible. It also enables them, sort of gets them access to the credits that they need, gets them access to the certifications that they need. Formalization also means in many cases they come with very unique value propositions, very unique business concepts. Getting them the IPRs, these registrations that they need. So first part is how do we formalize this? The second part, and this is where, Rajesh ji also mentioned, there's a lot of work that the government is already doing in terms of providing access to funds, providing access to all kinds of support. So there are those clusters that we talked about. Our Gujarat has PCIPRs and so on. The central government is talking about one district, one product kind of. So the entire approach to creating the ecosystem for them to leverage and grow on the back of that. So that's the second aspect of the growth framework that we should have. Possibly the third and equally important emerging aspect is what we can call the digital enabler. And digital over the last few years has become one of the key levelers for MSMEs. Now, for someone to focus on going to the domestic market or the global market, they can leverage digital in multiple forms. And that's one aspect, being aware of what capabilities the digital solutions bring in and using the digital bandwagon to grow. That's another aspect that the MSMEs need support or guidance on.
You mentioned formalization, which is an important part, but the onus for formalization very often lies with the MSME, and that essentially is the stumbling block, because that entails paperwork, that entails maybe a bigger workforce, that entails a CA enlisting services,
Right.
which becomes very difficult, right, for MSMEs, and especially when you have events such as COVID, or you have global headwinds and stuff like that. So, how do they overcome that? Like, what is the incentive for them? Yes, you mentioned that, there are, once they formalize, so many other things will fall into place. But, how do you think that behavioral change can be triggered?
The trigger to my mind is the actually the aspiration for growth. I think there's a supply side of all the facilitation that is there, and this supply side comprises the government, there's the central government, there's the state government, there are all these industry bodies, the CII, ASSOCHAM, all of them. So there is a supply side of all the facilitation. And then we have the need side, which is the MSMEs, the entrepreneurs, and so on. Now, there is somewhere an invisible wall of unfamiliarity between the two sides. And we have seen entrepreneurs who have been able to cross this wall, jump over this wall. And once they get introduced to what is available from the supply side, then they move into the next orbits. So the driver has to be the aspiration. There has to be more visibility of these schemes. And once the visibility is there, the hunger is obviously there on the demand side. Then they lap it up.
So, tell us, how did Symphony, jump that wall? And, you have a presence in 60 countries, Also talk to us about the sort of impact that, schemes like Make in India movement, have on such companies like Symphony, which operate globally.
So interestingly, Melanie, for us, and we are based in Gujarat, based in India, and we have always been very keen to go to the global market from India. And like you mentioned, we go to more than 60 countries across the globe, including some of the most advanced developed countries across the globe. We have always been focused on Make in India. And for over the last 20 years or so, we have been supplying to all these economies, all these countries, from our manufacturing facilities in India. So one clear aspect from our journey is that when you focus on the global market with the right sort of level of quality, innovation, and overall reliability, the market responds. We have ourselves been consistently reaching out to these markets, improvising on our products that we developed for the domestic market, improvising them to suit the requirements of the global market, consistently reaching out to customers in those markets, and that has helped us. So again, going into our journey, what we have seen working for us, and then what can be taken as a learning from that journey by the MSMEs, there has to be a clear focus on quality that can meet the global standards. There has to be a consistent approach to the market. You cannot, it may not be year one when you go there and people just rush to lap up your product. That doesn't happen. But you have to be consistent. You have to keep attempting. And then you have to be reliable. Because global markets feed substantially on reliability, given all kinds of risks involved, transits, commodity prices, the currency risk and all that, they need reliability. And if you can provide that, that helps.
You know, the one thing that is often missing in the discourse when we talk about MSMEs, and perhaps something that is kind of left to the sidelines, is often women in MSMEs, and furthering the development of women-led MSMEs. Talk to us about how that can be enabled, and in a state like Gujarat, which already is infused with so much entrepreneurial spirit. What are the strengths that it has, which can be leveraged to get more women into the ecosystem?
And an interesting thing that we noted as part of our journey, and something that statistics also bears out about the Indian ecosystem, a good proportion of our MSMEs are actually led by women. I think India has close to 15 million or so MSMEs, which are led by women entrepreneurs. That's a phenomenal number. Now, including, so let's say we have a model where we go to manufacturers who produce goods for us as part of our designs, and a few of those manufacturing units are actually led by women. And we have seen them work as much shoulder to shoulder as compared to our other manufacturing partners. So that's something that, in our observation, women-led MSMEs are definitely doing as well, maybe at times better, more reliable, more trusted than what we in our own ecosystem see in the overall MSME universe. Now, coming back to what can help women-led MSMEs grow faster or focus more, there could be a few things. One, we earlier talked about the entire formalization thing. One aspect of the facilitation, besides formalization, is the supply chain facilitation. In our experience, we have seen a lot of women entrepreneurs who are very good at the niche that they work in, whether it's the field of textiles, apparel, art, handicrafts, amazing at the core work that they do. But they need support in the supply chain. I have made something beautiful. Here's the piece, and this is wow. But how do I take it to the market? How do I ensure that it moves out of my village or my town to the global marketplace and gets delivered? So the entire supply chain is something that needs particular sorting. Another aspect we have noted is upskilling. Again, most of these women entrepreneurs, they start with very good core capabilities, but then that's good possibly at a micro scale. When you want to go to a medium or a large scale, then this has to evolve. It has to evolve in terms of the tastes, the geographies you want to cater to, the different segments you want to cater to. So upskilling is important. Now, one thing we noted was many of these women entrepreneurs, they are, for social or family reasons, they are rooted, they are linked to the locations, tied to the locations that they operate from. And hence, upskilling becomes all the more difficult because sometimes you have to be part of the global chain. So how do we bring the entire upskilling aspect to their doorsteps so that they can actually break free, so that they can go to the next tier of their own skill and their capability? That's one thing that, again, we have found is missing, that can be brought forward. And possibly the third aspect is, how do we get them into the mode of discovery? And when I say discovery, increasingly we see the market going to marketing-led brands to discovery-focused brands. And as more and more marketplace channels, including what we have as ONDC, for example, or GEM, for example, consumers are okay to discover new products, to discover new brands. But how do we enable these women entrepreneurs get discovered is one aspect that we can focus more on. So possibly, in addition to the framework that we talked about in general for the MSMEs, possibly these are the dimensions we should look at in facilitating more women-led MSMEs to come forward.
So what I was saying is that women know this, right? And other MSMEs also, they're aware of the fact that, they need to upskill. The fact is that, they need to be discovered. Their products need to be discovered. But, what is the on way? What stops them from moving into that trajectory? Because, data bears out that, 99% of the MSME ecosystem, if you look at it India-wide, then, 99% of it is micro, and it continues to stay micro throughout its life cycle. So really, how, the challenge is to go from that micro to push yourself out. And you said, it has to come, aspiration has to come, formalization has to come, but these are all stumbling blocks. So, and you see that there is an ecosystem approach, there is a facilitation, there is even drive, but somewhere we are not able to make that shift. Why is that?
Again, going by my limited experience on this, there's this formalization, facilitation that we talked about. For many of the MSMEs to jump into the next year, the entire marketing story or the discovery story has to be stronger. That is one aspect we find missing, both in terms of the support available and in terms of the readiness or understanding of these entrepreneur-led organizations, the entrepreneur-led entities, to adopt.
So are you saying there's an information asymmetry?
There is an adoption asymmetry, yes, including information asymmetry. That's for sure there. So the facilities are there. For example, we have DC MSME that helps market access, marketing support and all for MSMEs. But I don't think even 1% of the MSMEs are aware of the kind of support available. There's ONDC that takes care of most of the stuff besides what you are core capable of. But I don't think even 0.1% of the MSMEs have explored ONDC yet. There's this entire ZED, the zero defect, zero effect approach to quality that the government has taken. Less than 0.5% of our MSMEs, just on the quality side, for example, are registered with BIS. A similar number is possibly registered under the gold or platinum categories on ZED. Now, many of the MSMEs are not even aware that this is their journey towards building the quality. Under the bronze category, they are entitled to self-declare and self-register. So it's not as onerous. But how do we bring this information, this knowledge to the MSMEs is a key part. One of the limitations, which I'm happy also to say that this is being broken over the last 2-3 years, but one of the limitations I see is many of our central government and sometimes even state government policies, they are more readily accessible in English and Hindi, but not in vernacular. The internet, the YouTubes, the Instagrams and social media, they are more readily accessible in English and Hindi, but most of the MSMEs, as we said earlier, they are in the hinterland. If we can make most of this stuff, most of the facilitation available in the vernacular, in the local languages, that would be another big help to, this is all there, but how do you know that this is all there and access to it? That's another important piece that needs to be plugged in. As I said, again, happy to see that in the last 2-3 years, a lot of this is moving in that direction, but I think still some distance to go.
And hopefully through discussions like these, forums like these, with ideas and knowledge exchange, I think, somewhere, it will go down, percolate deeper, and hopefully, the ecosystem shifts that people like Mr. Barhat are attempting to bring, the knowledge base that, people like you bring in. And then, of course, we have so many MSMEs also who are sitting here, they take away from conversations such as these. Thank you very much on that note, Mr. Amit Kumar, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, Melanie. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you.